This morning, how many were here last week? Okay, so you heard Rabbi Amanda Green speak with David Chapman. She's from the Reformed tradition. He was from the conservative tradition. This morning, we didn't say much about Rabbi Green. She's been at the Sinai congregation since 2015. She's a native of Chicago, did her seminary training in LA, and has been a good friend of this congregation, been here several times. She and Nanette Sawyer have a regular dialogue going on. So that's enough. Rabbi Green, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you. Just want to thank all of you again for inviting me to be here and to spend time with all of you. This morning I was at Chicago Sinai down the street. We have our Sunday school program, and I was telling some folks that they said, "You're so dressed up," because normally on Sundays I wear jeans and we have a Sunday school t-shirt. And I said, well, I'm going to Fourth Presbyterian Church to teach about Judaism, and they were so excited to hear that you all were excited to be here and to learn about our religion. So thank you for that honor. I want to thank Polly for collecting some questions from last week, and also Nanette and I spoke earlier in the week. So I'm going to start with some questions that I've received since last session, and then a couple of other things I have, and then we'll open it up again for dialogue. So I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be part of a Jewish community. So I work at Chicago Sinai Congregation, which is a synagogue, or you might hear the word temple. They're synonymous, and they are institutions, just like a church is an institution. And in order to be a part of the congregation, there are members. And there are fees for members. I can share a little bit about, I think it's a bit of an antiquated model, at least in the synagogue world I'll only speak for, which is that our operating expenses rely on revenue. And so to keep our lights on, we have a building that is just about 30 years old. And so every important element of the building, it looks really nice, but like the HVAC is going down and every big expense, right, is just, and then of course to provide the experiences and the staff structure. So we do have a membership model. So last week I shared that Chicago Sinai has about 600 households. That's how we measure membership. It's hard to know, is a household 4 people? Is it 1 person? So we don't know exactly how many specific individuals are members of the community, but we know there are 600 households. Synagogues are very welcoming, and I would say that almost every synagogue that I know of, maybe even every synagogue, always has opportunities for dues assistance and dues relief. So we want to be a house of prayer for all people. And so we're always willing to work with folks on what works for them. And then, of course, the other way in which we supplement our operating expenses is through donations and philanthropy. The Hebrew word you may have heard is tzedakah. It comes from the word tzedek, which is justice. And often if you ask a kid, what is tzedakah? They'll say charity, which is not true, but really it's justice. And there is a sense of obligation in the Jewish tradition to give back to your community, to help repair the world. And one of the ways to do that is through philanthropy. And so we have a Sunday school program that happens on Sunday mornings where our junior kindergarten through 10th graders are in school. They learn all about the Jewish holidays. They learn about the stories in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, or the Old Testament. They learn Jewish values. They learn social justice and what Judaism says about various issues, particularly in our modern world. They learn about Israel. They learn about history. They learn about the Holocaust, the Shoah. They learn about all sorts of different elements in these different grades. And so our young students will bring what's called tzedakah every week when they come, which is normally $1 or $2 or a few coins, and they put it in a little jar that looks like a piggy bank. And that is how they start to learn the value of tzedakah, of giving back to the community. So that's how you become a member. You join, you fill out, we have it all online now, you fill out paperwork, and then you become a member of the community. Some folks mentioned that they have gone to services before. Someone was telling me when we were outside that they attend Shabbat services at the Brookdale, and someone else was telling me that they know a lot of Jewish people, but they've never been into a synagogue. So in America, in North America, you can walk into almost any synagogue on a Friday night for Shabbat or on a Saturday morning for Shabbat, and they will welcome you. You don't have to be a member. In fact, especially working downtown, lots of folks are guests in our community, and we actually just started, we have name tags, similar to you all. We have name tags for services, and there's actually a different color for members and non-members so that we can be more welcoming to the visitors. And we have lots of visitors, sometimes people who are curious about our community, sometimes people are visiting from another state, all different reasons. Sometimes non-Jews are curious. And so if you are ever interested in coming to visit us, you're welcome. Our services are at 6:15 on Friday nights. And hopefully the folks there welcome you very, very kindly and open-heartedly. I say in North America, that's the case. If you travel abroad and want to visit a synagogue, you do have to let them know in advance, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. Often they will collect information like a passport, just so for security purposes. And it's been that way for many, many years. As far as I know, certainly since I started traveling 20 years ago, before any of the rise in anti-Semitism, that's just always been their protocol in other countries. So sometimes when we have visitors from abroad, they will send us an email in advance and say, do we need a passport? And for us, we don't. We do, you will see. It's very different to walk into Chicago Sinai than it is to walk into Fourth Presbyterian Church. I was just telling somebody this past week. I said, when I walked in, I just walked in. No one stopped me. No one. And if you were to go to Sinai this morning, anytime we have a lot of people in the building, we actually have 2 armed security guards that are there right now. One sort of stays stationed at the desk, and the other one does laps. And that's a reality. Certainly for the last 10 years since I've been at Sinai, they've had security. It has unfortunately increased in recent days. This past week, there was a conversation about adding metal detectors, which is not anything that any of us want to do, but we do have a security consultant, and we try to hold on to our values of being a welcoming place, because we know for some people a security guard doesn't make them feel safe, and for others, well, we can't do enough to make them feel safe. So we really try to balance that. I also mentioned last week that at Chicago Sinai, we have 2 rabbis who are on our team, clergy, and that we're in a process, it's very exciting, of hiring our first cantor. And I just want to say a word about what a cantor is, because we have traditionally had a music director, I think, which is comparable to what John Shear was, and now, remind me, you have a new... Doug Cleveland. So we've also had music directors who provide the music for our worship services, who direct our choir. We also have a choir. I just saw Leah Dexter leaving when we were in the fire. She used to sing with us many years ago, so it was nice to see her. So we also have a choir. We are shifting a little bit to a cantor. A cantor is a full member of the clergy team. So when we bring on a cantor, our cantor will be able to officiate at all life cycle events, weddings, funerals. I'm going to talk a little bit about beginning of life and end of life as well. We'll be able to teach both adult education, also in our religious school for our young students. One of the main roles of a cantor at a synagogue is to oversee our B'nai Mitzvah program. So bar and bat mitzvah students who learn Hebrew and learn the chanting of the Torah, they normally help guide that process as well. But also will be responsible for all of the music at both our worship services, and then we're hoping, it sounds like you have a great musical program happening leading up to Christmas with so many opportunities. So we're hoping also to expand our musical offerings as well with bringing on a cantor. There was a question about Hebrew as well. So I just talked about Bar and Bat Mitzvah, where our 12 and 13-year-olds read Hebrew from the Torah. So how do we learn Hebrew? How do we teach Hebrew? Chicago Sinai has a very, I don't want to say fully unique approach, but a unique approach. Many synagogues, and I don't want to speak for Rabbi Chapman because he's not here, but many synagogues, starting in the 3rd grade, is when students start attending not just Sunday school, but Hebrew school as well. It's often midweek, and they don't learn to speak Hebrew fluently. They can't communicate 1 hour a week. You can't learn a full language, we all know that. But what they learn is decoding. So they see the symbol, they see the letter, the bet, that sounds like a B, sounds like a B, and they can recognize, oh, this letter is a bet. It makes a B sound, and then they can put the sound and the vowel together and say ba. And so that's really what they're learning, is decoding. They're learning here are some symbols, and here's what the sounds make. And after practicing for many years, they then can read the language. The challenge with that is most of the time they have no idea what they're saying. So before I went to rabbinical school, I got my master's in Jewish education. So this is why we do it a little bit different at Sinai. There is a reason to teach the skill set, because if you want to read from the Torah, you do need to know the code. What we do is we don't have a Hebrew school. We never have. Even before I arrived at Sinai, they never had a Hebrew school. As part of their 2 hours on Sunday morning learning, they would have that decoding. Here's a bet, here's what it looks like. Turns out that if you think about the way that you acquire language, you learn to speak before you learn to read. Why were we teaching our students to read before they could speak? So we teach Hebrew in 3 different ways at Chicago Sinai. 1, Hebrew through movement. Starting at the age of 4, we have a specialist, a Hebrew specialist, who goes into the classroom and who says, lakum, and everyone stands up. Lashevet, and they all sit down. And it's all oral, and it's all movement-based, and they start to hear the language. Hebrew now, the affect of Hebrew is fun instead of stressful, because we're playing around the world, and if you get the word wrong, you have to sit down. But they like it. So that has been like a significant change. The second way we teach Hebrew is we also have worship services, and we have every Sunday morning, we have a short abbreviated service for our young students. And our prayers, a lot of them are in Hebrew. A lot of them are sung. I always explain to a parent, well, your kid probably could sing the wheels on the bus or Twinkle Twinkle before they could ever read the word star or bus. So our students can say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad before they can even read the word God in English, right? Because it's a song. So then they know all the prayers. It's actually quite remarkable. Our very young students know all the prayers because they're songs, just like they know Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And in our services, we start talking to them about, what do these prayers mean? Echad, 1. That means that's the number 1. Echad. So what is it about Shema that's 1? God. We have one God, right? Or we go like this, Shema. Shema, what does Shema mean? Listen, hear. And so they start to know what our prayers are about, and then we delay decoding. So so lest you worry, okay, but how are they going to learn how to read? They do, much, much later. In 6th grade, at Chicago Sinai in 6th grade, every student gets a one-on-one tutor, helps with learning style, learning differences. We have a lot of them in this world. And it takes 12 weeks to learn the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. Not 4 years, because you don't have to worry about Johnny, who was absent last week and doesn't remember what a shin or a bet looks like. So instead, they have a one-on-one tutor. Then they're reading Baruch. I know the word Baruch because I've been saying it in prayers. I've been saying it during services. So now they're reading words that they actually know, and it comes across much easier. Just like if I'm reading the word star and I'm sounding it out, well, I know what a star is, makes it much easier. So what we have found is that students now love Hebrew. It's not stressful. They enjoy it. They want to learn more of it. And actually, their Hebrew is much more fluid. I mean, they're much better at reading it. They still can't speak Hebrew to an Israeli. That would require, just like learning Spanish or any language, would require some significant study of a language to be able to fully learn it. But that's how Hebrew education works. Our religious education for our young people is on Sunday mornings, because that's when you're all in church. And soccer games are on Saturdays because Sunday's a church day. So really, we have adopted Sunday school from you all. There's nothing, just like I was just telling somebody else, just like there's nothing Jewish about presents for Hanukkah. Someone said to me, oh, you have a big holiday coming up. I was like, no, all of our big holidays just happened. They're like, Hanukkah. Hanukkah's not a big holiday. We've made it a big holiday because, well, Jews feel left out during Christmas. Right? Someone asked me, they're like, well, what about the blue and white lights? Yeah, blue and white lights are because you all have Christmas lights. It's cultural appropriation is actually what it is. And we can have that would be an interesting dialogue for us to one day have about where are the boundaries, right? Many folks in my congregation will have a Hanukkah bush in their house, right? Or even a Christmas tree because they think it's pretty, right? And I'm sure, I'm not going to teach because I'm not Christian what that feels like, right? To have, I think a Christmas tree is pretty when maybe it is symbolic of something else. Hanukkah is a tradition of, it's beautiful, bring light into the world. You're supposed to light a menorah. That's it. Eat fried food. That's fun too. Donuts, latkes, very, very fun. Okay, a couple of other questions that were raised. Someone asked, Rabbi Chapman and I last week spoke about commentary on the text. And he brought some examples of that. And I was in my office this morning, and I was like, I could just bring a couple of books to show you all. And then I was like, well, my whole office is commentary. So one day you'll come visit. So someone said, who gets to decide what commentary is acceptable and accepted and what commentary isn't? And what happens when this commentator disagrees with this one? Well, Judaism loves debate. Judaism, the entirety of the Talmud is dialogue, and sometimes ends pages and pages and pages of debate and ends with this beautiful word, teku, which means let it stand. So you could just read the Talmud over and over, and you're like, okay, so what's the rule? There's no ruling. It's just to preserve the purpose of dialogue. So our commentators, even the medievals, who are well accepted by Rashi is a famous medieval commentator. Ramban they're all acronyms actually for their rabbinic names. They disagree all the time, and they're in dialogue with each other. And then as the commentary evolves, right? So if I'm going to write a commentary today, well, I've read all of those. So now I have to synthesize that and say, okay, but here's a new idea. So when we have our Torah study, Bible study, Torah study, we sit around for an hour. Last week I taught, the Torah portion was Lech Lecha, the story of Abraham being told to leave home and go forth on a journey. We spent the entire hour, Lech Lecha, just debating those two words. What does it mean to go for yourself or go forth? Why Abraham? Torah doesn't tell us why Abraham. Well, some people think it's because of this, and some people think it's because of this. Well, what are we supposed to learn from it? That's the whole purpose, is what can we gain from it? So our commentaries, it's all dialogue. It's really not about what's right and what's the conclusion. It's about the conversation. And if there's like one thing you take away about commentary and about Jewish text, it's dialogue. It's that it's supposed to be an ongoing dialogue and ever evolving. It's not law for law's sake. All right, 2 more questions and then we're going to get to the hot topic. So I mentioned bar and bat mitzvah, the ritual of when you're 12, 13 years old, becoming a Jewish adult. I quote, because they're not really adults. We say you have more responsibility, those kinds of things, but can't drive, can't vote. Parents don't really like when we say you're an adult now, and they still have rules at home, all of those things. Someone asked about beginning of life and end of life. So if we have questions, and this may be a point where you can fill in for me, what Christian rituals are fully around that. But what I can speak about is what are the birth rituals in Judaism and what are the end of life rituals in Judaism. And they date, the birth rituals date back to the Torah, Abraham as well. When a Jewish boy is 8 days old, the boy is circumcised and receives a Hebrew name. And the ritual is called a bris or a brit milah. Brit means covenant, milah, circumcision. It is the covenantal ceremony. It is actually when the baby technically becomes welcomed into the Jewish world. And that takes place traditionally it takes place on the 8th day. I can talk about how people have interpreted that. And sometimes now baby boys are circumcised in the hospital and they do a ritual later. All of that is very common nowadays. And so that's the birth ritual for a baby boy. In the Reform and conservative communities, well, we're more egalitarian. So what about girls? There's nothing in Jewish law about girls. But what we have added is a baby naming ritual for a girl. So some people choose to do that on the 8th day. Some people choose to do it on the first birthday. And it is similar to the Brit Milah in that they get a Hebrew name. So my name, Amanda, I have a Hebrew name. It's Hannah. Hannah and Amanda don't sound so similar. You might be like, how did you get to Hannah from Amanda? I was in the Jewish tradition, there's a tradition of being named for someone who's no longer living. So I was named for my dad's grandmother. Her name was Anna. Amanda Anna, makes sense. Anna Hannah also sort of makes sense, right? So the tradition then becomes to get the Hebrew. So I didn't get Anna, I got the A, but I do have her Hebrew name, which was Hannah. My middle name my parents just liked was Beth. So Beth Batya, that's as close as it can go. So that the B and the Batya has nothing family related, just sort of flowed off their tongue. Hannah is after my great-grandmother Anna, whose Hebrew name was also Hannah. That's how Hebrew names work. End of life. End of life ritual, there's actually a lot of ritual around end of life. So the question was specifically to funerals, but I'm going to talk a little bit about end of life and then funerals. We don't have in the Jewish tradition confession. It doesn't really exist. We have the holiday of Yom Kippur, which says we're supposed to repent, but we don't have any formal confession until we are dying, until the end of life. And there is a level of confession in that sense. The rituals around end of life is you are supposed to have what's called the vidui in Hebrew. And vidui is the same thing that we recite on Yom Kippur, the confession. There's a Talmudic text that says, repent one day before you die. Well, then the question is, well, how do I know what day I'm going to die? The answer is repent every day, lest you die tomorrow. So, but this vidui, there is a specific prayer, and then you also recite Shema, that declaration of Jewish faith. Those are the rituals. So this happens often as a rabbi, when I go visit somebody who is nearing the end of their life, we might sit around, we might talk about, if they want to do the vidui, we might talk about some of their feelings at the end of life. Are there things that they feel like they do want to confess or repent or reconcile before they die? And then we participate in a ritual. We recite Shema. We often offer a prayer. And it doesn't mean that their life is ending imminently, but it means they're nearing the end. Sometimes it does happen in that same moment. Sometimes you can actually say vidui on someone's behalf. So if someone I'll give you a personal example. When my dad was dying, we didn't know he was dying, but when it was clear that he was going to die and he was no longer able to speak, my rabbi actually came to the hospital, and we sat around with my family. We all shared our own words. We said a communal prayer, and then on my dad's behalf recited the Vidui. And so it creates a ritual around a difficult and challenging moment. So then end of life. So then after the life has ended, the ritual around burial and funeral. So traditionally after a Jewish death, you are supposed to bury as fast as possible. In Israel, people are buried sometimes the same day, sometimes the next day. I would say in our community, it's within 2 to 4 days normally, because it's really about honoring the dead. And interestingly, Jewish mourning rituals, M-O-U-R-N, begin after the burial. So there's a period called Anenut, which is between the death and the burial, because there's a recognition that there are sometimes plans that need to be made and logistics that need to be worked out. After the burial is called Avelut, which is then you go into the mourning. And Jewish law is pretty clear on who is a mourner. A mourner is a son or a daughter, a wife or a husband, a brother or a sister, or there's one more I'm missing. I said child, I said sibling, spouse. So sibling, spouse, child. I think I got it. Parent, thank you. And again, sometimes grandchildren participate in these mourning rituals. There's no right or wrong, but that's what Jewish law says. And immediately after the burial is a period of Shiva. Shiva. You might have heard of Shiva. It means 7. It's literally the Hebrew number for 7. And during those 7 days, people come to visit you in your home. You may have gone to sit Shiva if you might be part of a Jewish community. You go and pay your respects. We don't have visitation. It all again happens after the burial, and it really is about the mourners. It's about comforting the mourner. Jewish law says the mourner should be sitting in their home, and a comforter, someone coming to comfort them, is supposed to say nothing until the mourner speaks first, because bless you. Jewish law knows that people don't know what to say when someone dies. And so don't say the wrong thing, just wait till the mourner speaks. In practice, doesn't happen. In practice, it doesn't happen. But, and I happen to know a lot, I wrote my rabbinic thesis on the psychology of the laws of mourning, because I actually think Jewish mourning rituals have a lot to teach the world. I promise I won't talk too much, but there's there's the 7 days. Then there's actually what's called shloshim. It's the number 30, the first 30 days. So after the first 7 days, then you can re-enter the world. It sort of gives you the permission to enter a little bit more. In the first 7 days, you're not supposed to return to work. I always tell people it's permission. You don't have to follow it, but you have an excuse. You don't want to get out of bed today? Don't get out of bed. Shiva ends with a walk around the block. You're re-entering the world a little bit. But then you have 30 days. And in those 30 days, there are still some rituals that you have. And finally, you have Shana, the first year. So after the first year of mourning, they recognize that it takes a full year. Think about it, the first of everything. And then we have a Yartzeit, which is a Yiddish word for the anniversary of a loved one's passing. And we have a mourner's prayer. And the mourner's prayer doesn't talk about death. It talks about praising God only. And there's a rule that you're supposed to say that in a minyan, which is a group of 10 people, well, because no one should have to do it alone. I've been saying burial. Someone asked the question about cremation. Cremation, according to Jewish law, is prohibited because you're supposed to be buried. You're supposed to return to the earth. Your body was God's. The Jewish law sees cremation as desecrating the body. Jewish law. I work in a Reform synagogue. There are lots of ways that people choose to end their life, and some people would like to be cremated. And I will still officiate memorial services. Actually, we just had my emeritus rabbi just passed away a couple weeks ago. Even a rabbi chose to be cremated. So it is more, I would say acceptable is the word. Certainly in the Reform movement, I would be curious how Rabbi Chapman approaches that. I don't know the answer. Certainly not in the Orthodox world, it's not accepted. But we are very much about choice, right? It's all about knowing the ritual and knowing choice. Any questions so far on what I've talked about this morning? Oh, wait, sorry, I think we want you to use a microphone.
I understand that there's a custom of unveiling the tombstone
Yeah.
at the end at a year time.
So there is a ritual called an unveiling or a dedication, and that happens often around the year mark. And it's a mini ritual, a few prayers, and it's literally the unveiling of the gravestone. There's no law about when it's supposed to happen. Normally, it's around the year mark. Here in Chicago, it's around the year mark and seasonal. It goes both ways. Sometimes I'll get a lot around the holidays. People will say, oh, I have my family in town. Sometimes people will say, we're going to do it in the summer because the funeral was in the winter and we're not going back to the cemetery in January. So yes, there is that ritual as well. All right, I'm going to talk now about Israel and the Middle East and a word called peoplehood. Peoplehood. So Judaism is a religion, but the Jewish people are a people. What does peoplehood mean? It's an interesting word, and it has actually evolved, and there's been a lot of research. There's actually a museum now in Israel that recently they redesigned it, and it opened up, and it's on Jewish peoplehood. It's right outside of Tel Aviv. If you ever go to Israel, it's a good museum for another day. Peoplehood is this idea that I'm connected to all Jews, right? That the Jews in Israel, thousands of miles away, they're my siblings. They're my family. I care about them. I'm responsible for them. They're responsible for me. We care about each other as a community. There are certain things, that Shema prayer, we all say Shema the same way, right? There are certain rituals. When we bury our loved ones, we all sit Shiva. There are certain foods that we all eat. Latkes and sufganiyot, the jelly donuts for Hanukkah. We'll all be lighting candles on Hanukkah. So there are things that bring us all together as a Jewish community. So October 7th happened. We could go even earlier than October 7th, but I know that's like the common question. Horrible day for the Jewish people, the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, right? Really, really horrible. And I would say, I think that a lot of Jews who are living very, very far away felt like that event happened to them. Can't describe, it didn't happen to me, right? I was here, I was at home in Lakeview at the time. I remember, reading about it. I remember checking in on all my friends and family in Israel that day. I had been to some of those kibbutzim the year before. I checked in on the people who gave me the tour that day. She actually made it. But it felt so real. And then the days after October 7th happened. In the beginning, it felt very clear, right? We have over 200 hostages being held. Terrorist organizations infiltrated our country. Well, we got to do everything we can to get them back. And then time kept going, and the war got worse and worse and worse and worse. So I'm going to bring us a little bit to today. So in my community, we talked about Jewish texts, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. How many opinions do you think there are on the war right now? My job as a rabbi is not to be a political commentator. You can watch the news for that, or not, however you want to approach it. My job is to teach Torah. My job is to teach Jewish values. So I know that I can care so deeply about my friends and family in Israel and worry about them on a day-to-day basis. And I know that every Friday night I can pray for the state of Israel and its people and pray for the return of the hostages. But I also know that my heart is big enough for the suffering of other people, and that my religion teaches me that I cannot only care about my own, and that I am obligated to care pray, our prayer for the state, for the hostages includes Hagar in it, intentionally. And I know that I might not like the Prime Minister of Israel and what he is doing, but I can still support my friends and family in Israel. By the way, if you follow, like last night, every Saturday night, Hostage Square, there are people who are Israelis who are not happy with their government, who are not happy with the way this war is being fought, who want the hostages home. We have an Israeli teacher this morning. She was telling me, this woman who was supposed to teach Hebrew at this Hebrew Through movement that I was talking about, she's telling me she grew up on Kibbutz Be'eri, so that's she knew lots of people, and she said this past week, just another soldier who died in the north was a friend of hers. And I mean, these are real stories and real people and really difficult to hold and to navigate all of it and to feel, I think this is a commentary on the world we live in, that you have to be either or. And this is the message I gave my community on our High Holy Days. This is a false bifurcation. You can support Israel. You can want the hostages to come back. You can believe that there needs to be a Jewish state and that there also needs to be a Palestinian state. And that we also need to actually care about the innocent lives. I don't care that Hamas might be responsible for many of those deaths. We still have to care about them. In the north, in Lebanon, and in the south on the border in Gaza, right? We can do both. Frankly, we don't have a choice. That's what it means to be Jewish. And I think there is this bifurcation of, I don't like Bibi, I don't like the government, I don't like what they're doing. There are so many innocent Palestinian people, and therefore I'm anti-Zionist. I don't like Israel. Israel shouldn't exist. Israel's horrible. I'm going to just be pro-Palestinian. Or, hello, what happened? The Holocaust, wake up. We have to only care about I don't care what Bibi Netanyahu does. I don't care what. They did October 7th. We're going to destroy them. We're going to obliterate them because if we don't get rid of all of it, it's going to happen again. But there is a both and. And I think that is one of the challenges that a lot of people, Jewish people, don't understand. They feel they have to, it's an either or, and it just isn't. It just is not. And the people who think that there's an either or are creating so much animosity amongst our Jewish community. We see young people, really young, in my community, the biggest debates are between parents and children or grandparents and grandchildren. Not between friends, not between siblings, it's generational gaps. I grew up in your Reformed community, I was talking about the 20-year-olds. You taught me social justice matters. You taught me to fight for the poor. You taught me to fight for the innocent, and look at what your country is doing. What am I supposed to say to those people? Yes, and. Did I forget to teach you that Israel is a safe haven for Jews in a world, and that Israel can still exist, and also you can feel the deep pain and suffering? Now, it's complicated. I don't have a good solution. I wish I did. I wish someone did. I don't want to sit here and say there's no nuance to what I'm saying, because there's always nuance. Always. Years ago, when I was in school getting my master's in Jewish education, I wrote my curriculum guide on teaching multiple narratives of Israel. Because I always believed that we should never teach anything that we have to unteach. Right? So when I grew up and learned about Israel, I learned, there's the Western Wall. It's this beautiful place to go pray and put notes in. And then I went in 2004 on my first trip to Israel. And you know what I walked around the corner and saw? This section was for me, and this section was for the men. And you know what? I was like, I don't like this place. I feel no spirituality. Why is the Western Wall? Instead of learning the complexities. Before October 7th, Reform Jews were out on the streets protesting for democracy in Israel, because there were issues in Israel before October 7th. And so we have to hold it all, just like in our own country. If we want to have a stake in what's happening and how we can impact it, we got to stay in the game. And I worry that a lot of Jews have left the game because it's so painful and it's so difficult. So I have done a lot of talking today, and I really want to open it up. I said to Nanette before, no question, like I'm happy to imagine the questions I get there, even if they're about Israel. I'm happy to take any questions that folks have, and I'll do my best to answer.
Well, you did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
So this idea of peoplehood.
Yeah.
What did you mention a Jewish word for that? By the way.
So there is a Jewish word. It's called amiyut. So am is like Am Yisrael is the people Israel. So amiyut. It's a modern word because it's not. But it's a modern concept. But it's amiyut is the Hebrew
It is a modern concept. Is that what you said? I thought.
Well, it's a modern word.
Okay.
I don't know that the concept isn't modern, but the word is modern.
So the idea, that all Jews are connected to all
Yep.
Jews everywhere. In the Christian religion, this has not been the case. Throughout the Christian religion, the basis of it is, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're not going to heaven. So you're separate. I mean, that's ancient history. And so we bring that up to modern history, and I think we still suffer from this, that we're separate, or, the whole idea of, I don't want to go into the words, but this idea of peoplehood, that we all belong to everybody, everywhere, I think might be spilling over from this Jewish philosophy. And it might be what we're calling the beloved community now. Does that sound familiar to you?
I'm semi-familiar with beloved community, but I'm going to turn to Nanette to answer if there's a Christian concept of peoplehood.
There is and there isn't. So when we stand at the communion table, sometimes we say we are sharing communion with all the saints, meaning all the Christians, throughout all time and all space. And we invoke that reality, that spiritual understanding and experience. And we have a lot of division between different kinds of Christians. So we hold up this one theological vision of truth, of interconnectivity and interdependence, and then we have struggled to live into that. The beloved community is a phrase that has been used in very particular contexts, but it is about a world in which everybody is respected, in which we see the inherent worth and dignity in each and every person, and we're able to live in peace together. Those are some thoughts about it.
There's a lot of questions here. She's got the microphone for you.
Amanda, thank you very much for understanding enough about what we are to make the contrast that you've done. That was great. I'm curious if you know how many Reformed versus conservative Jewish congregations there are. Yours sounds great to me, but are there very many of them, or are you unique?
It's a good question. So the Reform community is the largest branch of Judaism in North America. Rabbi Chapman said last week, conservative Judaism is shrinking because folks are either going to Orthodox, like they're going one way or the other, towards Reform or towards Orthodox. In terms of synagogues, the number keeps changing. I wish I had a real number for you right now. Here's what I could tell you. There are about 2,200 Reform rabbis. I know that number because that's the number that the organization uses. And they all differ. So here I can talk about our local community. So Chicago, there's Chicago Sinai down the street, Reform community. About 2 miles north of here is Temple Sholem. It's on Lakeshore Drive, the round one. It's been there for a long time. A little bit further north in Edgewater on Sheridan Road is Congregation Emmanuel, which is a congregation that's decreasing in size. I'm not so sure if there's conversation that they might be merging, which is happening a lot, especially in the suburbs where there's a much larger Jewish community, lots of merging communities. Anshe Emet, which is also in Lakeview, that's a conservative synagogue, and it's a very large one. And then if you go south in Hyde Park, KAM Isaiah Israel, it has that long name because it was a merger as well. And it's also a smaller community. So there are, I would say there are a lot of Reform synagogues, and then Orthodox. There's tons of Orthodox communities, especially in West Rogers Park and in Skokie, and they're much smaller and much more unique, and they don't have necessarily big buildings. They're more focused on prayer and ritual and focused on a rabbi, learning with the rabbi. Yeah.
Thank you. I just have two questions. What is the difference between Yiddish and Hebrew?
So Yiddish was what was spoken in Eastern Europe, and it is a combination. It's sort of like Hebrew German. It actually, like my dad always said in high school, he took German to understand what his parents were speaking in Yiddish. Yiddish is a dying language because people don't learn Yiddish anymore. There are small Orthodox communities that are still trying to keep it alive. But Yiddish is a lot of words that, oi is Yiddish. There's a lot of Yiddish, like when I said bris versus brit, bris is Yiddish, brit. So there is some overlap. So there are more like phrases that stick around from Yiddish versus Hebrew. And Hebrew there's both biblical Hebrew, which is what the Torah is written, and then there's modern Hebrew. So I mentioned like amiyut, peoplehood, is a new Hebrew word. Lifasbek is Facebook, to Facebook's, right? Like it's a living language, and there's always new words being added to it. And some of them are biblical, and some of them are more modern.
And then I'm just curious, at end of life, what happens when there's a sudden death, like a baby is stillborn or someone dies tragically in a car accident? Because these things happen.
Right. So there is no vidui in those moments, right? That part of it is really impossible to participate, to engage with. And so that part doesn't happen. But again, there's no, you don't have to participate or enact the vidui in order to bring you to Olam Haba, the world to come. It's more about a personal experience than a law. It's a ritual that exists. When a tragic death happens, I mean, the same rituals exist. Also like burial, also Shiva, also Shloshim, all of those same rituals exist when a tragic death happens. Yeah.
We have one up here.
Someone else up here have a question?
I'm thinking about Old Testament, particularly the Psalms, because in our service this morning there was a lot around Psalm 16. So do you guys reference the same psalm numbers as us? Like if Psalm 23, is it the same Psalm 23 to you and your
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd.
Yeah. And Psalm 16.
And actually, so yes, I mean, there's 150 Psalms. You also have 150 Psalms, great. We do use them. We use them in different ways. So Psalm 23, for example, is one that we use a lot. Speaking of end of life, we use it a lot at funerals. It's familiar. People know it. We have a Hebrew it's beautiful. We also have a Hebrew version of it. So often it will be sung by a cantor or a musical person in Hebrew, and then the community will recite it in English. The concept of the valley of the shadow of death. So Psalm 23 we use in that particular area. Psalm 150 is part of our morning liturgy every day. That is part of what's called Pesukei de Zimra, which is the morning songs. Zimrot are songs. And then on Shabbat, actually, there is something called Kabbalat Shabbat, the receiving of Shabbat, which is our preparation for Shabbat. And traditionally, you recite psalms. And there's a bunch of different choices and different psalms that you can include to sort of lead up and prepare yourself. So we do use psalms. We also use psalms at the bedside when they're meant to bring comfort. I would say we don't use them as much as we should, but they are there. Yeah.
What is the Jewish concept of the afterlife or resurrection?
We had this question last week as well. So in a short amount of time, because that is a question that could be years long, The question of afterlife is, the short answer is that Jews focus on the here and now, right? So some Jews believe in a Messiah. Some Jews believe in a messianic era. So Reform Jews pray for a messianic era, a time when the world will be whole. So our work in the world is called tikkun olam, repairing the world. And that's our job. And when the world is repaired, that's when the messianic era will come. The afterlife, we believe that the body returns to the earth and the soul lives on. There is in the Talmud a section of text called Olam Haba, the world to come, which does talk about an afterlife a little bit. But really the main concept in Judaism is that it's about the here and now and not about the afterlife.
This is possibly a long answer, so I just real quick. The connection between Islam and Judaism, and I'm asking because I heard several times that Islam, people who are practitioners will say, oh, we talk about Mary more than you do. And Islam came after Judaism. Is there anything in Islam that really continues what the earlier teachings were?
Oh, I don't want to speak on behalf. Do you know? I mean, I know the Abrahamic faiths, but beyond that, I don't know if there are things that they practice today that stems from Judaism. I don't know.
Yeah, we would really have to bring a Muslim in here to talk about the connections with Islam. Yeah.
Yes. Could you talk about the growing anti-Semitism in America?
Yeah, it's growing. I think that it never went away. That's thing one. Anti-Semitism never went away, and I think what happened is that we became naive a little bit and a little too comfortable, and it's always been bubbling, and now it's exploding. And I think that's stemming from, people say it's the left and the right, and I think some of it comes from what's happening in Israel, of course. Some of it stems from old anti-Semitic tropes. I think, honestly, this class that you're doing is what's going to help the Jewish community fight anti-Semitism, is people meeting Jewish people, learning about who we are, learning that we're not all the same. But there are some real, what happened on college campuses last spring is deeply concerning. And I think a lot of it stems from lack of education. There are people who went around and did interviews and said, you're saying from the river to the sea, do you know what the river is and what the sea is? And they don't know that what they're, some people know what they're saying. Some people know that they're saying we want the Jewish people gone. But some people don't actually know, right? So I think a lot of education is really needed. It's real. Like, I could sit here and tell you, and if you would like, I mentioned to Nanette, my sermon from Yom Kippur is up on our website, and I shared a few examples, real examples of, they were all from students, either in high school or in college, of really, really horrible things that happened to them, so I'll say it's real. Like, that's the awful part about it, is it's not made up, it's real, and I think the only way that we fight it is to start building bridges when we're not in crisis, which, well, we're in crisis so hard, education, and just continuing to be proud Jews, right? That's like, I still wear my necklace. There are people who want to tuck them in. A lot of people tuck their necklaces in. They don't want to show that they're Jewish in the world. I mentioned, even if you walked to Sinai right now, it just feels different to walk into a synagogue. They're wearing bulletproof vests, and they're not hiding. When I started at Sinai, our security guards, you didn't know they were armed. They were, but they wore these like big Hawaiian shirts, so they were concealed. Now, they're in bulletproof vests. It's the reality of the world, and frankly, it's costly. 18% of our budget this year is security. So it's real. Do you have a specific question about I can give you two really good books, Anti-Semitism Here and Now, and one is by Barry Weiss, How to Fight Anti-Semitism, but Anti-Semitism Here and Now is written by Deborah Lipstadt, and she is she was appointed by President Biden to oversee I forget exactly the name, the Department of Fighting Anti-Semitism, and she was a professor at Emory, and she's an incredible scholar and human being.
How do the different branches, if I could use that term, Reform,
Yep.
Conservative, Orthodox, deal with the issue of abortion?
Okay, so here's the thing. Jewish life, this is a big difference. Jewish life begins at birth. Like when the head is out and when the life is breathing, that is when Jewish life begins. So that is the same across all denominations, that Jewish life does not begin until then. And our texts go on and are pretty descriptive about what happens when there are like kind of crazy examples, like a woman is in a fight and she falls over, and what do you do, right? And the woman's life, the mother's life takes precedence until the birth, until the infant is a living being. So that's not abortion, that's just like the way that our concept. And so most people don't, so Jews, Reform Judaism for sure, and Conservative Judaism very much pro-choice, in the sense of it's the woman's body, the woman has the right to choose, and also the fetus isn't a life, so you're not destroying a life. So that is like the essence, that's like a huge difference in our religions in terms of understanding when a life is a life. And then there are some differences there are some very extreme Orthodox Jews who have found loopholes to say, like, to protest against. I don't even know the texts that they're using, but there are, they're understanding the fetus as a life. But that's like the big essence. I mean, even so much so, if you think back to the ritual of a bris, the 8th day, because children died, so there were so many infant deaths. The 8th day was sort of a marker of if they lived past the 8th day, then they would likely live. And that's why the naming happens then too. So that's the way that the Jewish community is able to reconcile abortion. There's lots of, let me just say one thing. If you're curious about social justice issues like that, there's a really good resource called the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism. And you can find tons of resources about all sorts of topics, but that one in particular, tons and tons of resources. Also, National Council for Jewish Women is doing a ton of work in that realm right now.
We probably have time for one more question.
One more question.
So who has a good...
All right, front row.
So first of all, I want to...
Yes.
I just want to thank you for your words, and I love the term peoplehood. And it almost makes me cry. But the thing is, I really feel like this is really the beginning of our healing. And I mean that for every faith. We know, I'm sure you know, at the Parliament of the World's Religions, I mean, and I moved probably about 5 years ago, and so I'm in Edgewater, and I absolutely love it because there's over 250 languages spoken there. And my neighbors that I have, on one side of me, he is a Muslim. The next person is a Muslim. The next person, well, 2 people, they're married. One is Jewish and one is Christian, and she is so open to everything, but loving is the answer. And I think that term peoplehood will really help people to think about what we're doing. And just because somebody does something different, this may sound like a crazy way to explain it, but if you like a certain food, you like it. You don't have to eat what I eat. So I just think you have a really beautiful way, and I've been working in interfaith work. I'm 76 years old. I started when I was in my 20s. Wow. And so you are excellent.
We have a lot of work to do, and this is a start, so thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Green, for being here with us and helping us begin to know and grow in our knowing, and we look forward to our ongoing relationship with you. Thank you so much.